All right. So today we have Mr. Neale here, Harry Neale. You remember that Harry Neale was a defenseman for the Memorial Cup champion Toronto Marlboros in the 1950s. He began coaching at Ohio State University in 1968, and during the 1970s, he coached the Minnesota Fighting Saints and the New England Whalers in the WHA. In the NHL, he coached the Vancouver Canucks, and he also served as general manager. In 1985, he joined the CBC's Hockey Night in Canada as an analyst, where he was paired with legendary play-by-play man Bob Cole. Over 2 decades at CBC, he moved closer to home to become an analyst with the Buffalo Sabres. Harry was awarded the Hockey Hall of Fame's prestigious Foster Ewart Memorial Award in 2013. Harry joins us today with his son, David. It's David right there. Would you please welcome from East Amherst, New York, Harry Neale. Interview Harry, we have well-known member. He's a hockey historian, he's an author, he's editor of the Hockey Hall of Fame's Legends magazine. We all know Kevin Shea.
Very good. Well, thanks everybody for joining us this afternoon, and really looking forward to spending some time with Harry and all of you as well. We've got a video clip we're going to show to start off with, something that Paul Patskow's put together for us. Then we'll get into things. I'll ask you to hold off on questions until the end, and then Harry will be delighted, I'm sure, to answer questions or respond to comments, and we'll move forward that way. So play the video for us, if you will, Brian.
Okay, let's see how we do.
So today we enjoy a conversation with Harry Neale. There he is with the Weston Dukes. Oh, there with the Toronto Marlboros, as you can see. What a Memorial Cup there with the Marlies, the OHL. Terrific team with a lot of guys who went on to the National Hockey League, specifically with the Leafs. Harry winning an award there as the best defenseman.
Brilliant.
Moved into some senior hockey with the Galt Terriers. They won the Allen Cup at that point, then served in the World Championships.
Wow, there's a card.
There we go. Following the WHA, Harry moved over into the National Hockey League, joined the Vancouver Canucks. There's our Rick Vibe on the right.
Wow.
Yeah. So Harry's astute and entertaining quips made a natural progression. A season with the Red Wings, and then moving into the broadcast booth. Harry moved into the broadcast booth, and as you can see, he worked with a great team.
Oh. That's it.
Rick Jennerette in Buffalo, great partnership there as well. In 2013, Harry Neale was made a media honoree of the Hockey Hall of Fame, the recipient of the Foster Hewitt Memorial Award.
I couldn't find it.
Delighted today, of course, to welcome his son David and our guest of honor today, Harry Neale. So Harry, I'm going to take us way back, and I want to ask you, you're born and raised in Sarnia, but what brought you to Toronto?
My dad worked for Imperial Oil and he was transferred from Sarnia to Toronto when I was 10.
Oh, okay. And we were talking at one point several years ago about a momentous occasion in April 1951. You were at the game-winning, the Stanley Cup winning game with Bill Barilko scoring the Stanley Cup winning goal. Can you tell us any memories that you have from that particular game?
Well, as a Toronto Maple Leaf fan growing up, to have Barilko win the game and win the Stanley Cup, and I was scored at the south end of Maple Leaf Gardens, and I was in the standing room behind N Blues. So I saw him come off the blue line, get the puck and score, and as thrilled as everyone else was in the rink, so was I, and even Barilko liked it.
That's for sure. You talked about standing room only. Tell me about that kind of an experience in Maple Leaf Gardens.
Well, I know one thing, that when I was old enough to go to the games, 15, 16, 14 years old, take the streetcar down from where I lived in North Toronto to Maple Leaf Gardens, for 90 cents, you could sit in the grays. I don't think that's true anymore, but
That's for sure.
But anyway, you had to get up there early. The game started at 8:30 in those days, and so you had to get there at 7:30 because there was such a race up the stairs. There was no elevators or anything in Maple Leaf Gardens to race up the stairs to get a spot to stand, because before any of the seats were filled, the standing room at the Grays at 90 cents a ticket were gone.
Jeez. Boy. So you were part of the Toronto Maple Leafs organization going back to when you were probably 14 or so years old. How did that come to pass, Harry?
Well, in those days, there was no NHL draft, but if you played for a team sponsored by the NHL team, they had the pro rights to you. And I played for Shopsy's Pee-wees and then the Toronto Marlboros, Bantam Midget, Junior B, Junior A. So all those years, if Toronto wanted me to be their property when I was finished junior, all they had to do was add me on the list. And they put me on the list, and of course, I wanted to be an NHL player. And I went to training camp in Sudbury, and they sent me to Rochester. He hadn't signed me yet, and I was finished 2 years of university then, because my junior career was over. And my dad was sure that I wasn't going to be good enough to play in the NHL. And so he said, why don't you go back to school, play another year at the University of Toronto, and then do what you want to do. And I said, well, I can't. The Leafs, if they don't sign me now, they're going to just turn me loose. And so I went to the training camp, and I went to Rochester's training camp, and I phoned my dad the day before I had to re-register at the University of Toronto, and said, I'm coming home tonight, and tomorrow I'm going down to sign up for my third year to get a BA at the University of Toronto. And I don't think I ever gave him news that made him happier than that. To think that my dream of playing in the NHL was finally realized by me. He knew it long before me.
Lots of great successes before you got to that point as well. And of note, of course, the Toronto Marlboros winning the Memorial Cup. What a team you had there. Can you talk about the Marlboros beating the Regina Pats for the Memorial Cup, and maybe some of those great teammates that you played with at the time?
Well, it was a great thrill. The Memorial Cup was presented about a month after the Stanley Cup was, because you had to get out of your own league, then you had to get out of the rest of Ontario, then you had to beat the rest of Canada. So, and I should throw the Montreal Junior Canadiens and the Quebec team in too. So you had to play about 5 rounds to get there. So, you know, it was almost at a time where the rinks we played in weren't being able to hold the ice. It was too hot outside. So to play for the Toronto Marlboros and be a Memorial Cup winner was a thrill for me. Some of the players who played there, Bob Nevin, Bob Pulford, Al McNeil, my memory's not as good as it should be, Bobby Bond, Daryl Sittler, Carl Brewer. And so Harry Neale was just a guy on the roster, but he didn't make it like all those guys did.
But a hell of a defenseman nonetheless. So a good career for you at that point too.
Yeah, I made the OHA Junior All-Star team, or
Wow.
the second All-Star team that year. And that made me think, well, sure, I'll be able to play in the NHL. Because if you win that trophy, you must have had a good year. To make a long story short, I went back to the University of Toronto, graduated, and went and taught high school in Hamilton for 6 years. In those days, there was such a shortage of teachers. You didn't have to go to the College of Education for a year after you got a degree in order to get a teaching job. What you had to do was get the teaching job, and then for 2 summers, you had to go to summer university to get the education. So for 6 years, I coached a high school team, and I know you'd be interested in seeing what I taught. Health education, physical education, and that was it. They didn't trust me with anything like mathematics or.
You played in an advanced level with the Galt Terriers and played senior hockey as well. You went on to win the Allen Cup and then played in the World Championship too. Talk about that a little bit, if you will.
Well, when I was teaching high school, I somehow got a call from the guy who was running the Galt Terriers. And in those days, senior hockey was pretty popular in Ontario, pretty popular in Canada, actually, because a lot of players who were like me wanted to play in the NHL but weren't good enough, got jobs. And here for Galt, you got $40 a game, and you played most of your games on the weekend, so you could hold another job. So for me, I thought that was great. I still wanted to play, and I played on a real good Galt Terrier team, and we did win the Allen Cup, which was big time in those days. The senior championship in Canada, and usually the senior champion, the Allen Cup winner, went to the World Championship, and I was on that World Championship team, but I got hurt early in the tournament at Colorado Springs and never did get back in the lineup. But I had a good seat on the end of the bench to watch Canada win the World Championship.
Go to Ohio State to coach and work down there. The name Glenn Saumore comes up in your life, and he was a big part of your life, moving into several different stages. Let's talk about Glenn Saumore a little bit, if you would.
Well, I first met Glenn. He taught high school in Hamilton at one time too, and I knew he was a professional hockey player. and I knew he lost his eye, so his playing career was over. So when I coached Hamilton for the last part of a year in the OHA, Sonmore was now getting ready for the WHA, and he had taken the job at Minnesota, University of Minnesota, but when the WHA started, they hired him a year before or almost a year before the league started. So he was busy traveling all over the place and would phone me every other day wanting to know what this guy was like, because when Hamilton played Guelph, they had a couple of guys there. Hamilton played St. Catharines, or Hamilton played Toronto Marlboros. He wanted to know what I thought of a certain player. And so when finally he got the job, he was the general manager and coach for the WHA Minnesota Fighting Saints, and I was the assistant coach. And I'm guessing halfway through the year, or third way through the year, in his attempt to find out who we could steal from the NHL to join our team in the WHA, he had to go to games. So I became the coach of the Minnesota Fighting Saints, and that was one of my great opportunities, my first opportunity to coach professional, and we had some good players on that team and had a good team. And one of the toughest teams, of course, the league was full of tough teams. And one of the toughest teams, and fighting was one of the part-time jobs of some of the players. We had 3 or 4 players who liked it. And Sonmore used to tell me, Harry, if we don't stop this fighting, we're gonna have to build bigger rinks.
Well, just before we get into it even deeper, so you knew about the National Hockey League clearly, and were on that path at one point. What did you know about the World Hockey Association before it debuted in 1972-73?
Well, I didn't know what they were talking about when they were gonna become a league and compete with the NHL for players and hopefully get into the NHL. And, you know, on our team, and I think it was one of the greatest things that ever happened to the game was the formation of the WHA. First of all, the salaries in the NHL were ridiculously low then. And so to keep the players from going to the WHA, the NHL teams had to pay them more. And for the players that went from the NHL to the WHA, they made more money than they would have made in any other league. So in that regard, it was a good thing for hockey. And I think really one of the things that it got hockey started in some cities across the United States that ended up not having a team or having a very minor league team and built interest. And the next thing you know, more American kids were playing in the United States in some of these cities that had a pro team, even though it wasn't an NHL team, it was a pretty good team. And it wasn't long before the NHL, who had become a Canadian pro league more than anything, American players, kids started playing. The next thing you know, Americans were coming in, and we all know how many there are now because hockey sprung in many of the areas that the WHA went to. And also the WHA was bringing Europeans in, not a lot of them, but this was a new idea too, to have players that played in Europe or in Asia, but mostly Europe, come to the NHL. And we knew they were pretty good because in the Olympics or the World Championships, these teams were not quite as good as the American team or the Canadian team, but they had some good players. And you can see the number of Europeans that have been in the league since. So the WHA, I think, was part of that, not on purpose, but they did do it.
I'm going to throw some names at you, and I wonder if you could just comment at that, if you would. Wayne Connolly, for example, was a terrific player for you in Minnesota.
Yes, he was. And we had Mike Walton, Dave Keown. Now this is 3.5 years Minnesota was in operation. Paul Holmgren, Ted Hampson, John Garrett. And so we had John Arbor. We had a team that had some players that were great before they got there or played in the NHL after the WHA folded. And so it was really something to be able to coach a guy like Mike Walton. He had 38 goals for us the first year. Here's a couple of Walton stories. At the Minnesota rink, the boards were made of glass. So the people sitting in the front row, if they wanted to look across the rink, they could kind of stand up and see it, or they could look through the glass. Well, this one game, Mike Walton slid into the boards, not hard, just down from the penalty box, and he lay there for about 10 or 15 seconds, then got up and came to the bench. And I said, Mike, what the hell are you doing? Are you all right? He says, yeah. I said, well, you were laying there for 15 seconds or more. He says, yeah, you see that good looking girl there in the red dress? I wanted to check and see if she was wearing any underwear. It broke our whole bench up, including me. But Walton was, Walton, here's another Walton story too. If he didn't like the way we played, he would just, in the Minnesota rink, he went up a ramp to get into the parking lot, cement ramp where the Zamboni came down and so on, and to get to your car. And this one game, he came off the rink at the end of the rink where this ramp was, and there's Shaky going up in his full hockey gear up the ramp to get in his car and drive home. And I saw him the next day, he says, what the hell you were doing? He says, I didn't want to go to the dressing room and listen to you after that game. We were So he was a real character if I've ever seen one. In one game in Winnipeg too, he did the same thing. He was with about 10 minutes to go in the game. He had had enough. He got a 10-minute misconduct. So he went out of the Winnipeg rink, and it was about 20 below in Winnipeg, as you can well imagine. And there was the outdoor pool, but it was covered with glass, so you could swim in it all year. So he walked out there, and he was in the parking lot all by himself. And thought, well, I'll just go in the pool. The door was open and nobody was in there. Next thing you know, he was in the pool. And then the guy that was running the pool came on and said, get the hell out of here and put him out. Now I had to wait about 15 minutes till our team got undressed and the equipment truck. By then, he was covered in ice. So we came out of the dressing room to go up in to get the bus to go to the airport, and there's Walton, and that's why he got the name Shaky.
Oh, so the Minnesota Fighting States didn't finish the 1975-76 season, and they ended in February of that year. You moved over and joined New England at that point and met some new people over there. Talk about your experience there.
Just a minute. I have one more Minnesota story to tell you. About maybe 3 weeks before we folded in February, we had a 2-game trip. And the guy that Ralph Mellenby, who was the president and the guy who put the team together, we didn't have any meal money. $60 each for the team and for the trainers and for the coaches. And I said, we usually give this to the players before they get on the train or the bus or the plane. And I said, we don't have the money. And the next thing you know, Belial's running down, he's got a bag. And he says, here in this bag is $2,000 in $50 bills, $20 bills, $10 bills, $5 bills. So you sort it into, and full of rubber bands, and you sort it into the 60 or 70, whatever it was, dollars meal money for 2 games. So there we are on the plane, and we got empty seat between us, and we got cash all over the place, sorting it into piles of $80. And the next thing you know, the pilot comes down after about 20 minutes, and we've got all this money piled in front of us. He says, what are you doing? And I said, well, we're putting this money into the envelopes to give to the players. It's their meal money. He said, what are you down here for? He says, 4 people have come up and said, there's 2 bank robbers sitting there. They want you to do something about it. So now it's on to Hartford.
On to Hartford. Yeah, tell us a little bit about New England and your experience there.
Well, I signed for Hartford, and then they signed after I became the coach. Gordie Howe, Mark Howe, and Marty Howe. And that was the year Gordie was turning 50, and I thought, oh my God, am I going to be the coach that has to tell Gordie he can't play anymore? Not only was he my idol, he might have been the greatest player that ever played. And so there we go to camp, and I'm still thinking, I hope he can play. And the the Hartford Whalers and the WHA, New England Whalers, they were called then. I used to get a hold of the players early August to tell them in early September, we're going to training camp. And I want you to run a mile a day, so you are in decent shape when we get there. When we come to training camp, before practice, we're gonna run a mile. And then we're gonna go in and change and have our regular day. So there we are lined up in front of the side, and I used to be a jogger those days, where we started off. And there's Gordy. And Gordy comes over to me and he says, Harry, the only thing I do to get ready for next year is to make sure I'm within 2 or 3 pounds of what I finished last year at. And I said, so I don't do any exercises. I don't do any running for sure. I said, you don't have to run. He says, what do you mean I don't have to run? I'm on the team. How can you have everyone else have to run and I don't have to? I said, leave it to me. And I said, I have an announcement before we go. Gordie Howe does not have to run like the rest of you guys do. And if you ever play for me the year you turn 50, you don't have to fucking well run either. So get out of here. And Gordie thanked me for about 20 minutes. And Gordie was a great player. You know, people say, who's your favorite player of all time? And I said, Wayne Gretzky, Gordie Howe, and who was the other one? Wayne Gretzky, Gordie Howe, and Bobby Orr. And I said, if you ask me Monday, it's Orr, Howe, and Gretzky. If you ask me Tuesday, it's Gretzky, Howe, and Orr. And if you ask me Wednesday, it's Howe, Gretzky, and Orr. I said, I can't make my mind up who the best is, but Gordie Howe was dedicated completely to the game. It was unbelievable how well he played, led our team in goals that year. And Mark Howe, who had Gordie's blood, was a terrific player. And Marty Howe, who was tough but didn't get Gordie's blood, and so he was kind of on the edge all the time. So Gordie, one night we're playing Cincinnati, and Rob Torek played for Cincinnati, and he came out to block a shot by Marty Howe, and high sticked him and cut him. Down goes Marty. Now there's about 4 minutes left. We're in the playoffs, but Al Smith was our goalie, and if we allowed less 2 goals or less, he would win the goalie award. So to make a long story short, I'm mad at Gordie because I'm thinking of Al Smith, and he was a very popular guy on our team. So game ends, they don't score. The game ends, and I think, as a coach, I got to say something to Gordie. Gordie comes over, and I said, Gordie, you can't do that. I said, what if they scored and Al Smith doesn't win the award? And he looked at me, he says, I couldn't let that son of a bitch Torek get away with what he did to Marty, and I'd do it again tomorrow. And I thought, well, I better get out of here or I'll be next in line. But that was Gordie. He was a mean guy. And Mark Howe, who's in the Hockey Hall of Fame, was unbelievable. He was one of the great players of all time, played in the shadow of his father. And Colleen Howe, Gordie's wife, I'll never forget this game, the rink caved in, the roof in Hartford, so we had to move to Springfield, which is an American League rink, held about 5,000. But it was only 30 minutes or less drive from Hartford to Springfield. And so to get to the wives' room, the wives had to walk by the dressing room down to the end of the rink, and there was the wives' room. So this one night after the game, I come out of the dressing room, I'm waiting, getting ready with my assistant coach, and we're going to drive back to Hartford, where we all live. And Colleen stops and looks me right in the eye, and he said, when I come to a game, Harry, I come to see my 3 boys play. And I noticed Marty hardly played at all after the second period. And I said, well, I don't want to argue with you, but, you know, as a coach, I had to write the bench the guy that didn't play well. He said, don't ever do it again. And she walked down the third. So her toughness was transferred on to Gordie for sure. And I'm just so proud to say someday I coached Gordie Howe, and I'll never forget in Edmonton one night. We played in Edmonton, and then 2 nights later we played in Calgary. So I thought, why go to Calgary, a 2-hour drive from Edmonton after the game? We'll wait, we'll practice in Edmonton tomorrow, and then we'll take the bus down to Calgary to get ready for the game the next day. And so I thought, well, you know, I gave 6 guys the day off. And I had it written on the blackboard. These guys, we'll see you after practice. And I said to the equipment guys, pack all their bags and put them on the truck. So Gordie Howe was one of the guys whose name was on the list. So the practice rink was across the park in Edmonton, about 200 yards. And so I told the players, carry your skates and go on over there with your stick. And the trainers will be over there and we'll have the practice. It will be a short one. And then do the same thing and come back. And we'll be on the way to Calgary. I go over there, there's Gordie. He's in full equipment. And I said, what are you doing here? He said, oh, practice. He says, I like to practice. I said, I know, but your equipment's already on the bus. He says, I know, I don't know whose equipment I got on. I just took some. And I wasn't going to argue with him anymore. But his love for the game was one of the reasons that he was as good as he was. And one of the reasons why I consider myself one of the luckiest coaches ever to have coached.
Another name, you coached him in Minnesota and in New England, is Dave Keown.
Yeah, Dave Keown, I think was one of the greatest Maple Leafs of all time. A great skater and one of the best forecheckers I've ever seen. He could get an angle on you and the guy would think, well, I'll just skate you around the edge of the rink, and not a chance. Dave Keown wouldn't allow that, and yet he was a good offensive player. I mean, he was one of the great Maple Leafs. A lot of people get mad when I say I think he was the greatest Maple Leaf. And then he came and played in Minnesota and then played a little bit in Hartford. When he had contract misgivings and couldn't sign in Toronto, so he came to Minnesota. When Minnesota folded, he went to Hartford. And so he was one of the great players of all time. And he and Billy Harris and myself became owners of the Harris Keown Hockey School. And we ran hockey schools in the summer all over the place, mostly north of Toronto, but we ran one in the Northwest Territories. And we had one we ran out west in Edmonton. And so I became a real good friend of Keown's. And not only was he a great player, he was a great guy and a pleasure to coach, that's for sure. And he put the pressure on the coach. He'd say, if we don't play well, we want to hear about it. And you're supposed to know what we're supposed to do to change it.
So we've talked about some greats, Gordie Howe, Dave Keown, Mark Howe, et cetera, et cetera. You also had the boys from Slapshot on the team, 76, 77. You remember the Carlson boys and Hanson playing for you as well?
Yeah, well, that's why we had the toughest team in the league. You got to remember this now, when I joined Minnesota in the WHA, it was not like one of the WHA cities. Hockey was big there. The winters were cold, backyard rinks were popular. They had the North Stars already, and in many of the cities, they had leagues and rinks, and high school hockey was very popular. When they had the high school championship, they'd play in one of North Stars rink or our rink and sell it out. That's how popular it was. So to have a team in Minnesota, it was not like having a team in many of the WHA rinks where you were in a brand new area as far as pro hockey was concerned.
You know, the World Hockey Association only lasted from 72 to the end of the 79 season. You know, what was the thought, you know, rivaling the National Hockey League? You know, can you give us some of the parallels between the two leagues and the differences? Was it pretty well known that the league was eventually going to evolve into, or at least some of the teams anyway, evolve into the National Hockey League area?
I think the people who put the WHA together, I think that was one of their motives. That we would find out teams, other cities, other than the NHL ones, would be good NHL cities to be in the league, because they were all talking about expansion in those days. There were only 12 teams or whatever it was. And the WHA, I think in the back of their mind, the owners thought, you know, we may have a team here that we can get in the NHL if our league doesn't survive. And of course, the league didn't survive, and some of the teams, some of the cities that had WHA teams were in the NHL, not right away, but they are now, and they were then. And so it was one of the motives, but it was one of the hidden motives, because the owners thought they could create another league that eventually would become as good as the NHL. And that, of course, didn't happen.
Your final year with the WHA, the final year of the WHA, you guys went to the final and played against Winnipeg Jets for the APCO World Cup. Remember going to the final? And tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, that was, Winnipeg had a great team and we had a very good team too. And the day before the final, the 2 days before the finals, we were in Winnipeg because we finished the schedule in Edmonton, Calgary. Wasn't worth going home to start. And so Glenn Sonmore and I sat didn't go to the press box. We sat in the corner seats where Winnipeg played their last game. And Sonmore, who of course only had one eye, when Winnipeg scored, everybody in front of us stood up. So he stood up and his eye fell out. Trickled about two rows down and rolled under a guy's feet. And Glenn got up and said, I got to get my eye here. I'll go down with you in case you can't find it. So he goes down and there it is. He said to the guy sitting there, can you move your feet? Because I want to get my eye. And he looked at him, saw this blank spot. His wife was screaming. So he reached down and got his eye, came back. He says, I'll be back in a minute. I got to go to the washroom and wash my eye off before I put it back in.
Oh, boy. Well, after the WHA folded, you found a career with the Vancouver Canucks, returning to the NHL that way. Had several good seasons there. It was challenging at times. You had some characters there as well. You had some great players. Talk about Vancouver, if you will.
Yeah, Vancouver was a great, lived a dream of mine of playing the NHL. Well, that didn't work out, so now to coach in the NHL. And they were one of the newer teams. And we had a pretty good team, and then a better team. And the next thing you know, we're in the Stanley Cup Finals against the New England Whales, the New York Islanders, and this would have been their third Stanley Cup. So I thought, this is a chance for us. They've already won 2, so it's not a novelty anymore. They beat us 4 straight to win their 3rd, and they went on the next year to win their 4th in a row, which I don't think will ever happen again. And they had a great team, and we had a good team in Vancouver. Not as many good players, obviously, but we had, I'd say, half a team that could play in the NHL under any circumstances and do well. And so it was a pleasure coaching Vancouver and being a chance to get in the NHL.
Yeah, for sure. Talk about coaching in Vancouver. You had Roger Nielsen there as well.
Yeah,
Any
Roger was
stories
my
about-
assistant coach.
Right.
Really a good man. And I knew Roger from growing up in North Toronto. I went to Lawrence Park High School. He went to North Toronto, I guess it is, the school. And so we played against each other, playing Pee Wee and Bantam and so on. And we became very good friends. And he would work at our hockey school for us. So when I got a chance to coach and have him as my assistant coach, it was in Vancouver, it was really a thrill. And I think it was after 2 years, might have been after 2.5 years, the owner of the Vancouver Canucks, we weren't playing very well, called me up. He says, I want you to make a coaching change. Now Roger is coaching and I was the general manager. I said, well, Roger Nielsen's a great coach. What do you want to change him for? And for whom? And he got mad at me. He says, Harry, there's no need for 2 people to lose their job over this one decision. Get your ass down to the dressing room and tell Roger he's finished. So to make a long story short, that's what happened to Roger. And he went on and coached again in LA for a little while and was one of the great guys and loved hockey. His passion for hockey was unparalleled. And to have him as my assistant was a thrill, and he helped us become a good team.
Perfect. Your last year of coaching in the National Hockey League was with the Detroit Red Wings. Tough time with that team. It was not the best team in the league either. But can you talk about that Red Wings team?
Well, to get a chance to coach in the NHL again after my Vancouver days, I knew Detroit was in I don't know what you call it, a rebuild, but they weren't as good as they usually had been and got to be. So off to Detroit I went, and it was Yzerman's rookie year to show how early it was. And we didn't have a very good team at all. And so it became quite evident we weren't going to make the playoffs. And as most of the coaches that have teams and the owners think that they're going to make the playoffs and they don't, they lose their job. So this one day, I got a call from Jimmy Devellano, who was the general manager, saying, we're gonna relieve you of your duties. And I said, I signed a 2-year contract. I'm hopefully, I don't want to have to go to court to get paid for it. He said, don't worry, you'll get paid to the end. So here I was. Vancouver owed me for a year. Detroit owed me for the 1.5 years. And I went to the Hockey Night in Canada and got paid. So for my first year with Hockey Night in Canada, I made more money that year than any other year. Because 2 teams are paying me and Hockey Night in Canada is paying me.
You know, while you were coaching, had made some forays, I guess, into broadcasting at the time. And I guess that led to your career in broadcasting. It's a different side of the business for sure, but it was a wonderful one for you. And I wonder if you can tell a little bit about Hockey Night in Canada to begin with, and then maybe you can talk about Bob Cole too.
Well, to get a chance to stay in the NHL but not have to win was a real privilege. And I loved the game, and so there I was, so without a job. And although I had done just a little bit of work for Hockey Night, so they knew me all right. And so when they hired me, I worked for Hockey Night in Canada every weekend, and then for what was it, TSN? No, not TSN did midweek games for the Leafs. So the next thing you know, I'm doing about 75, 68 or 70 games during the season, and then Hockey Night did all the playoff games in those days. So I did 3 rounds of the playoffs, and Bob Cole was my announcer, my play-by-play commentator for most of the Saturday games, because that's when he lived in Newfoundland and he used to come in, and he was one of the great broadcasters of all time and one of the great ones that I've ever worked with. And he was well prepared, and he was, you thought he was a player, because if I ever said the wrong thing, I got the Heisman Trophy Award. And that meant stop, and when the play starts again, or you talk too long, or you're talking silly, this is what you get. So I asked him if he played football at any time to learn that. He says, never, I'm from Newfoundland, we don't have football out there. But he was well prepared and got well excited and announced the game. And his law of order was, when the game's on, I talk. When the game's not on, you talk, unless I want it. And that he very rarely wanted to, but he might have had something to say. But he was a stubborn guy, and became a real good friend. And a lot of people tell me they think over the years he's as good as there was at a play-by-play announcing, and I can't disagree with him.
For sure. You were living in the Buffalo area at the time, but coming in for the Toronto games, you talked about Bob Cole commuting. You were commuting too.
Well, once I found out the price of beer in the United States, I moved there in a hurry. My wife, our kids got old enough that they didn't have to be looked after. She was a registered nurse. She wanted to go back to work. So if I was going to continue with Hockey Night in Canada, I couldn't be away, and she couldn't do it. You know, she couldn't go to work every day like she did when the kids were all at school. So I got a chance now to work for Buffalo doing the color commentating for 6 or 7 years. And I worked with Rick Jenneret, who has become a legend in his time and a real great guy to work for or work with. And just did his last game not too long ago, and I was in pleasure going down and spending some time with him. And so for me, in the broadcast business, to work for Bob Cole and Rick Jenneret, how lucky could I possibly be? And I worked part-time with other guys, but neither of them were Hall of Famers as those two are.
Wonderful. 2013, your wonderful broadcast career brought you to the Hockey Hall of Fame. You became a media honoree and won the Foster Hewitt Memorial Award. A real honor for a terrific career as well.
Oh, absolutely. When I got the call from the Hockey Hall of Fame to tell me I was going in, not that you have to apply for it or anything, I couldn't believe it. Because, you know, I used to go in Toronto, when I did the games in Toronto, I'd walk up to the Hall of Fame and walk around and remind me of all the days that I was a great hockey fan. And so to become a member of the Hockey Hall of Fame in the broadcast division was one of the great thrills and rewards for my long career. And I never thought it would happen. But when it did happen, nobody enjoyed it that privilege anymore than me.
2022, we're honoring the 50th anniversary of the starting of the World Hockey Association. You're in the WHA Hockey Hall of Fame as well.
I am.
Well, then here's the award right here.
Well, that at the time was an honor to get for sure, but it's not like the NHL one, which is business for thousands of years, I think. The WHA was a 3 or 4 year business, but to be told that was let's say a minor threshold thrill for me, and I didn't apply to get out once I got in.
Some wonderful memories, terrific stuff. We want to open it up to the gang here too and see if anybody's got questions, comments, queries, submissions, whatever it happens to be. Talking to Harry Neale about his extraordinary career. Why don't we start with you, Len?
Okay, Harry, you were around the Toronto hockey scene in the late 1950s. Can you tell the people about some of the hockey stars that were around, junior hockey stars that were around in those days? And I'm thinking about Bill Kennedy and another guy who was a first team all-star Toronto Marley center, 4-old native. His name is Jack Martin.
Yeah, well, I can't, my memory's not as good as it used to be, but there's no question about the fact that Kennedy and Martin and I can't off the top of my head. Mike Walton, Dave Keown, and I mean, I'd like to remember all of them, but my memory's not good enough. So I'm sorry I can't answer that question intelligently.
Very good. Dennis, you had a thought or a question?
Yeah, what high school did you teach at in Hamilton?
I taught at Westdale, Hill Park, and what's the new one on the south, on the top of the mountain there? Relatively new one. Three high schools. Delta, Hill Park,
Delta, okay, thank you,
Westdale.
thank you.
Were you one of the students, Dennis?
No.
I remember you in my nuclear physics class. You were a bomb and you blew up that.
Frank, you have a question.
Yes, I'm glad you expounded on Shaky Walton. Shaky was from in his youth, and that might reflect on all the antics he went through. And he was brought up in Curtin Lake, Ontario. You know that, right?
Yeah.
Wow, that's important. Well, anyway, Dave Keown and you know, a lot of guys, their fathers worked up in the mines.
Yeah,
Like David Keown.
yeah.
He was born in Noranda, but his father worked in a gold mine an hour down the road.
Oh, I know.
Quebec and all that kind of stuff.
Well, I know a lot of hockey players came from Northern Ontario and Sudbury and Kirkland Lake.
Only 40 from Kirkland.
Very
You
good.
know, well, Walton was special.
Yeah, well, how come you didn't make it?
I've been playing old timers hockey for 79 years. I'm same age as you.
Very good.
So good for you. I couldn't do it, I'll tell you that. I played old timers hockey when I was trying to make the NHL, and that's probably one reason I didn't.
Questions from the peanut gallery. Here we go. How about you, Wayne?
When you went to New England or Hartford, and then you heard Morty Howard's side there, how do you coach a guy like that? How do you coach?
Well, it's not as if you're trying to get him, but he was coachable. I mean, he liked it when you said something to correct maybe what he did. I didn't correct him too often when he got 2 and 3 goals, but sometimes he played, his shifts was too long. And not only would that cause him a problem, but what about the guy that's going out and gonna get a 22nd shift now? So he was coachable. Now, not that I spent much time doing it, because why would you? He knew more about the game than anybody else I knew, and at 50 years old could still play and be an asset to our team. So for me, it was one of the great thrills of my life. And I don't know whether Gordy thinks the same or not.
Got a question at the back. Go ahead.
You coach Bruce Boudreau.
Yes.
Did you see any signs of him as a player that he can go on and become a coach?
No, I can't say that, but that's not a comment. He was a good player. And I didn't, you never know how many, not a lot of players want to be coaches because it's not the job like the one they've got as a player. And for Boudreaux to become a coach and have the success he's had, I'm very happy for him. He's a good guy and was a good player for me.
Another question over here. Go ahead, Benoit.
Yes, I'd like to show you something. What do you remember most about these Thursdays in Vancouver?
Well, I liked them, but a lot of people didn't. They thought they were stupid uniforms, but in the playoffs, when we went to the finals, they looked very good to me.
Do you like them?
I didn't, that was the least of my worries what the uniform was. I was worried about the guys who go in the goddamn.
Another question at the back. Go ahead.
Yes, hi, Harry. Stephen Brunt wrote a couple of books, one called Searching for Bobby Orr and the other Gretzky's Tears, talking about time periods in the NHL and the influence of a particular player on that era.
Right.
Would you kind of pick out a player that you think really had an influence on the trajectory of the league, past or even what you see today? Would you have a comment on, what you saw with a particular
Well, Orr and
player?
Gretzky certainly are in that classification at the top of the list, but I don't think you have to go to the star status those guys had. If you were growing up and wanted to be a hockey player and lived in some city other than Toronto or Montreal or a Canadian city.
Kirkland Lake.
What about Perry Sound? The cottage near Perry
10,000
Sound.
lakes there, you got a
Right.
lot of ice in winter.
So I can't think of anybody off the top of my head, but those two guys stimulated the thought and the success of a lot of players who wanted to be players because they idolized those two. And there are others, of course, Beliveau, Cyril Rocket Richard, all the French Canadians. And at one time, there was a lot of kids from Quebec coming into the league. Unfortunately, for the rest of the league, they all played in Montreal. And then when Quebec came in, they struggled too.
One final question,
I
please.
just wanted to, Harry, do you get the chance to converse or convince with Bob Cole at all? And if so,
No, I haven't for quite a while. He lives in Newfoundland. And I tried to get him on my cell phone and they'd never heard of Newfoundland before. He's getting up there in age, and so he doesn't, when he comes east, he'll give me a call, but I really haven't talked to Bob for 2 or 3 years now.
Yeah, I just wondered if you had a chance to get together in person to
No,
share some of your.
not
memories.
not recently. When I went into the Hockey Hall of Fame, he came to it, which was very nice of him. He was already in it, so. He was a good guy to work with, and I think he was tougher than most of the players as a broadcast. If you got on the wrong side, you heard about it.
Yeah, very good.
This has been extraordinary. We appreciate your memories. You're crystal clear. It's been wonderful. Some fun, some challenges, some great stories for sure. Please, let's thank Harry Neale.
You believe me, it's your goddamn fault.
It's my very great pleasure on behalf of the Society for International Hockey Research to present to Harry this, our 2022 winner of the Paul Kitchen Award. This book, The Golden Years, all about the Beehive Corn Syrup hockey pictures. And we really appreciate you coming to see us today, Harry. And thank you very much on behalf of the
Well,
Society.
thank you. I used to put this on my waffles. No, don't be screwing it up.
That was all right.
It was great.
No, going into